This is part 2 of our study of 2-5-1 jazz patterns. In part 1, we looked at the major 2-5-1 jazz pattern. Here we're going to take a look at its companion, the minor 2-5-1 jazz pattern, a necessary component that we need when we're studying standards. The major and minor jazz patterns have distinctively different sounds. Let me play them for you here back to back so that you can hear that difference. Here's the major 2-5-1 jazz pattern. And here's the minor. The minor pattern has a much darker sound to it. So now that you've heard the sound, let's get in and take a look at how it's made. Now, as we start out to explain what our minor 2-5-1 pattern is, let's go back and take a look at our major pattern because we're going to modify it a little bit in order to get started with the minor pattern. Let's take it into key of C, and that means our first chord, the 2 chord, remember, it starts on the second scale note of C, so it's going to be this D note, and we're going to build a minor 7. And then from here we go to the 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and remember we do this, we lower 2 top notes to get a G7 dominant chord. And then to get our 1 chord, we come down to the first scale note and build our major 7 there. Now all of these chords on the major pattern 2-5-1 come from the major scale. All 3 of those chords fit the major scale. Now as we go to study our minor 2-5-1 pattern, all of the chords come out of the minor scale to give us a minor sound. So our 2-5-1 minor jazz progression does evolve out of the chords of the harmonic minor scale. If you were to make a chord on every note in the harmonic minor scale, you would discover that that's where our 2 and our 5 and our 1 are that we're going to talk about and learn here. However, I don't find it practical or useful to keep referring back to the harmonic minor scale as we're studying and talking about the minor 2-5-1 progression. And this is because the harmonic minor scale isn't a scale that we're used to jockeying around in our head and referring to all the time like we do with the major scale when we study jazz and play jazz. It's something even us professionals don't use a lot. We use it sometimes, and we certainly know how it works, but it's nothing that we really refer to a lot. So I find it best just to know where the chords come from, but we don't have to keep talking about it or referring back to it and tie up our mind with trying to get to know all of our harmonic scales as we're learning the 2-5-1 minor jazz progression. So what we're going to do is start the same way. Let's take the second note of the scale, make a D minor 7. Now we're going to lower the 5th. So it's like this. This is what we call a D minor 7 flat 5. D minor 7 flat 5. And that's the name of the chord. It's kind of a mouthful, D minor 7 flat 5. So we take a regular chord, find the 5th, and lower it so it looks like that. We can do that anywhere. Let's go to E minor 7 and lower the 5th to come up with E minor 7 flat 5. Let's try it one more time on F sharp minor. F sharp minor 7. Now we're going to lower the 5, that's the C sharp. That's F sharp minor 7 flat 5. Let's see how we find the second chord in our minor pattern. So we play our 2 chord as a D minor 7 flat 5. Now we go to the 5 chord, we're going to go to a G, and in order to get there, we're just going to lower 1 note. It's going to be our pinky up here is going to come down 1/2 step, and that's the second chord in our minor pattern. Just like this, we play minor 7 flat 5, lower the pinky 1/2 step, and there's the second chord. Let's do this in another key just to make sure we understand. Let's take it into key of D minor. The 2 chord in D minor is an E minor 7 flat 5, and we'll play our root down here. Now as we go to the 5 chord, which is going to be an A, we just lower the pinky to the next nearest note, a half step down, and there is the 5 chord in the minor pattern. E minor 7 flat 5 to A7 flat 9. That's a 2-5. Now let's go back to our original key of C minor and play this again and take a closer look at something. We're in C minor, we've got the 2 chord, that's the D minor 7 flat 5, root in the left hand. Now we move to the 5 chord, the dominant chord, by just bringing the pinky down a half a step. So this is a G dominant chord, it's the 5 chord in the minor pattern. The left hand defines it as a G, we're holding the root note, but you'll notice in the right hand that there is no G. The G is only played here in the left hand. So in our right hand, we call this a rootless chord because there's no root in this 4-note chord in our right hand. It's rootless. The root is down here in the left hand. What I want you to notice about this rootless chord in the right hand is that it's a diminished chord. If I release the left hand and look at this chord by itself, you'll notice that it is a diminished chord. All the notes are 1.5 steps apart from each other. G in the left hand. But it's not a G diminished chord. It's a G dominant chord. And let's see if we can figure out exactly why that is. Let's take our top note, the B, and put it down here on the bottom. Now what you'll see with these first 4 bottom notes is G7, a good old-fashioned G dominant 7 chord. But we're adding an A flat to it. It's a color tone, the 9th, the flat 9, we're adding on the top. If it weren't a flat 9, it would be here on the A. It would be a G9 chord, a rootless G9 chord if we take off our left hand. We have the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, 8, 9, G9. But here we're going to flat the 9. And it fits in context with our 2 chord to create this very often used sound when we play standards. A very typical jazz sound and jazz move for playing standards. Let's take a look at the 3rd chord in our minor pattern. Let's come back to the key of C minor, starting on our D minor 7 flat 5, and then turn it into the 5 chord, lower the pinky. Now the 3rd chord is going to be some sort of a C minor chord. We're in the key of C minor, and it's going to be some sort of a C minor. I say some sort of a C minor because we actually have a choice of 3 common places that we resolve our minor pattern to. And our 3 choices are based on what we see as common uses in standards. When we look over all the standards literature, we see 3 common places that it resolves to. The first place is a regular old C minor chord. Sounds like this. A 1 chord of whatever key we're in. And we can double the root up here to make them all 4-note chords. The next common place we see when we resolve our minor pattern and get to the 3rd chord is a minor 7 chord. So we play the first 2 chords and now go to a minor 7. And this is based on common usage. When we look at all the standards, we see that more often than not, it's going to go to a minor 7 chord if it goes anywhere. Often it's played as just a 2-5 without going to a final chord of any kind. One more choice of a final chord is a C minor 6 chord. So we play our first 2 chords, C minor 6. So we make that by playing a C minor chord and adding 1 step above the 5th to make the 6th. You'll notice that when we get to the final chord, we have to change all of our notes in our right hand. We can't retain any of the notes. By that I mean, here's our 2 chord, and we retain 2 notes in the bottom of the 2 chord to get to the 5, But now we can't retain any notes. We have to let go of all of them to get to C minor, C minor 7, or C minor 6. None of the notes are in the G7 flat 9 that we came from. Now let's take a tune that we can practice our minor 2-5-1 with and enjoy it a little bit instead of just going in and looking at the theory. And I'm going to choose a minor 6 as the final chord of the minor pattern to use. Now this song is quite convenient for our study of the minor pattern because we can use it for the entire A section. So let's just kind of hum along here and see how it goes and play the chords so we understand the order of them. La 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 la. Repeat. La la la. Down to the minor 6. La la la. La 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 la. La la la. La la la. Sometimes it's better not to think about the words because that'll give you one additional thing to think about. If you can, it's great. Otherwise, just kind of hum along and get used to how these chords are moving against a melody. Now I'll walk you through an exercise on how to learn our minor pattern in 12 keys. Just like with the